Hey, Dr. Anita here. I want to welcome you. Good day, good morning, good evening, whenever you're watching this or listening to this. I want to introduce myself a little bit for people who don't know who I am. My name is Dr. Anita Marcasani. I work as an executive leadership coach, and I'm a retired licensed psychologist. And I work with a lot of people over a lot of years doing a lot of things. And it has come to my attention, particularly recently, how often people are getting swept up into relationships that end up being very, very damaging. And what I've noticed is that people who are mature, healthy, normal human beings can get very easily sucked into a relationship with someone who is not so healthy, maybe not so mature, and maybe not so normal, and you end up feeling like you're the crazy person. And what we're not going to do today, because it's not possible, is we're not going to diagnose anyone or talk about like anyone having a specific diagnosis of any kind, because that's not possible to diagnose anybody without actually doing a formal diagnostic interview with someone and meeting with them in person. And so no one's going to be throwing around diagnostic terms or anything. What we are going to do, though, today is talk to a fantastic person that I've known for a while. And she is going to be going by the name A. We are keeping her anonymous just for, just to kind of keep things a little bit safer, I guess, for lack of a better word. And just to make sure that that there's no backlash or any kind of weirdness with some of the issues that she's had that she's going to tell you about. Also, you should know that when we have these discussions, she's going to be referring to people, and I'll be referring to people in vague terms about what their relationships are, but no names of people. We're not here to tell other people's stories or anything like that. What we are here to do is help educate you on what it might be like if you are caught up in a relationship where you end up feeling like you're really messed up and you don't know how you got there and it's your fault. And it doesn't seem like it should be your fault, but it sure feels that way. And that's who we want to talk to. And it's been my experience, and A can give her experience too, just popping around the internet. There's not a lot of people talking about what it's actually like to be in a relationship, whether it's a close, intimate relationship or a work relationship or anything, with a person who kind of falls outside the normal spectrum of behavior. And I say that with caution because, like I said, there's no diagnoses here that we're throwing around or anything. But the reality is that there are people who behave in very extreme ways who affect like normal people. And that's what we want to talk about today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut my mouth and I'm going to turn the microphone over to A. And A, why don't you just give us a kind of an overview of what you're going to be talking about today, and then we'll dive into a little bit of your background.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Dr. Anita. Like you said, we've got to know each other a while, so this is really a treat for me. I ultimately want this story to be a story about hope. Because even though that people can harm you the way that you described, I mean, you ultimately can heal after the life you want. You don't need other people for that. You need God and yourself, and that's the team that's gonna move things forward. But ultimately, I did want to share my experience of being with someone who portrays the characteristics of a narcissist. I'll tell some examples, and I think there's a lot of examples out there. But like you said, ultimately, I want to focus on myself and my behavior, because ultimately, that's what kept me stuck in that relationship. I truly believed I was losing my mind, and that I was crazy. And my behaviors during that time period, there was plenty of evidence, if you will, to back up that belief, because of what was done to me psychologically. So if you want, I can kind of just go through an overview of what began, and
Yep.
we can just kind of keep talking from there.
So I'd love for you to do, if you don't mind, is just kind of give us a little bit of background too about who you are and that sort of stuff. And also clear that you are not currently in this relationship. You've gotten out, you're free from this person. And yeah, so just to be real clear that relationship is over.
Yeah, the relationship's over. Like I said, I've done a lot of work with healing. I'm actually in a wonderful relationship now that's extremely healthy. Um, Ultimately, I'm good. I'm very happy. So, yeah, yeah, all of this has been broken free from, thankfully.
All
So
right, so yeah, who you are and a little bit about.
yeah. So, I mean, this kind of starts. Back in 2018, I left an abusive marriage and I moved across the state. I actually was in the middle of finishing my master's degree when that happened. So, I'm just going to call that out just because, you know, professionally, I was doing very well, was getting my education. So, I definitely was educated. So maybe I had some vulnerabilities, but ultimately I was really excited to start over. I did a great deal of healing, like I said, from moving toxicity from my life. I participated in regular therapy sessions. I did group therapy. It was all wonderful. And at that time, I was just full of promise and excited. I had a really supportive family. I still do. And just close knit relatives, close knit relationships, great friendships. Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a very blessed life in that I don't need um, to depend on other people to support me and my family. I was doing those things myself. And again, I just want to call that out because I think there's this perception that you find yourself in a relationship like this because you have this extreme vulnerability, or that person came in to rescue you financially or something. And that wasn't the case for me at all. I didn't need anybody.
Right, you weren't desperate, you weren't
No.
emotionally desperate, you weren't needy, you
Mm-hmm.
weren't you didn't require anybody financially to help you with your family, and you're very well educated, you're operating at a high level professionally. Yeah, so this is not like the sort of thing that happens to people who, maybe are struggling in so many of those same areas.
Right, absolutely. And I guess I could bring that up to, a person with this type of personality um didn't necessarily go after a type of person like that. That wasn't, I mean, if I was that person's target, I wasn't necessarily maybe too needy or anything. Um Again, it's not like he was completely aware I did not need to be rescued or didn't need to be. I just wanted a partner to share my life with, just like everybody else does. And that was my vulnerability. That was the only thing that made me vulnerable.
And yeah, and I hate to use the word vulnerability because that's just a normal part of life, is to want to be able
Right. True.
to have an intimate relationship and get married and share a life together. That, I mean, I'd hate to think that motivation is something that would make someone vulnerable. Maybe it does, but but just so people listening know, it's completely normal. It doesn't make you vulnerable. I mean, unless you're, I guess, over focused on it and yeah, willing to just accept anybody. But even then, it wouldn't, yeah, it doesn't necessarily make you, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
it's funny. I actually made that really clear at that time that I wasn't going to just accept anybody. And so when I say vulnerability, I almost think that maybe that instead of that word, maybe it was more of that was loophole, perhaps, to get in.
yeah. Yeah, very good. Well, tell us how you met this person to the early time, because one of the messages I try to convey to people when I talk about, like, what's the difference between someone who might display, not diagnosing anyone, might display characteristics that are associated with narcissistic personality disorder, or certainly strong traits in that direction, how that person might be different than someone who's just really egotistical and bombastic and just kind of self-focused, because there's a lot of different things going on with all of those characteristics. And so what happens, and my point is, what happens in the early phase
Mhm.
of a relationship with someone like this sets the groundwork for
Yeah,
later on.
yeah, definitely. And now looking back on it, I mean, I could see a lot of that. And honestly, I'm probably, if I really kept digging, I would probably even uncover more. But after a while, it's just like you have to stop just to even move on.
No.
So yeah, I mean, so again, where I was in my life, I was just full of promise and excited about the future. So I just started to do a little bit of dating. I tried online dating sporadically. Sometimes I'd set up a profile, other times I'd be like, yeah, this isn't for me. But I did meet this individual online. There was really nothing serious going on before that. I did a little bit of both online dating, some people I met in person. At that time, my grandmother had had a stroke and ultimately passed away in May. So that took a lot out of me. And I wasn't really dating too much there. Overall, I was just enjoying life. But yeah, I met this person in the middle of 2019. Right off the bat, different from other conversations that I had with people that I met online. A lot of times it was like, how is your day going? What do you do? His interest in getting to know me was so much more profound. During our online chat, he suggested an activity where we both shared 5 things about each other, which I thought was like really neat because like it was like showing that he truly had this desire to get to know me. Um, because the chats were going so well, he seemed normal. And so I offered him my phone number, which is very unusual. I typically didn't do that. So, he called the next day and we talked for a long time about all kinds of topics like today's youth, politics, religion. We had similar backgrounds. So it made sense to do the next step of meeting. So, typically you probably talk maybe for a week or two before you even get to that point. This happened in a matter of days.
Okay.
And that didn't even really to me seem rushed or anything. Again, it was just kind of like, yeah, let's just meet and get to know each other more. I I felt like I will always say I knew that from that first meeting there was something off. I could just feel like there was something a little bit off. Like when we had that first meeting, he wanted to sit and talk for a little while longer. And we weren't able to do that because I think the place was closing that we were at or something. And you could tell he had to almost like there was a flicker of anger and he had to keep himself in check. And I could tell that right away. But again, I thought, well, he's trying to make a good impression. Like everything, and that's just everything about the beginning, even if it was off, it could be explained. And so I kind of just, was like, yeah, okay, he was nervous or he was there. Because he was so attentive to me, it just seemed like maybe he had some social awkwardness going on that I could maybe work with. Maybe he just needed someone in that regard. I could tell there was a bit of an edge to him, but he was so interested in me. And I just thought, you know what, maybe if this works out, maybe this is something I can help him with. And he can help me with, standing up for myself a little bit more. He really made me feel important because like he would want to run all of these work scenarios past me. Let me see what you think about this. Or he would tell me something about his day and then stop and be like, see, you really get it. I have never talked to someone who gets it like you do. You're just so smart. You're fascinating to talk to. Like I would get all of these things constantly. And so I really did. I felt like, and again, it was self-affirming really. Like I knew I was smart, but I just thought, well, okay, it's great that somebody recognizes this. And then that's great. He'd write me these like random notes and mail them to me. Like, you've changed my life so much for the better. Like, so everything was just what really overall wonderful, other than a few tiny like things of like, oh, I can tell this is irritating him, but he's not really bringing that up or something. I was fine. And I wanted him to go on a family trip with us so that he could meet some of my family members, test the water. And that's really when something changed. So this is about like probably 8 weeks into the relationship now.
Okay.
And
He's been nothing, just to clarify, he's been very, very attentive to you and lavishing you with all kinds of praise. I think at one point you mentioned something to me when we were talking offline about how he said, oh, other people I have to, what was it, like talk down to, but, or not talk down to.
yeah, but like explain more this to, but you get it right away. I'm used to having to explain myself more or use more detail, but you get it. And that was a big thing with him. You get it.
Hmm.
You like, you get me. You get it. All of this, like, I truly just understood. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, I totally do understand what he's going through. And, um, with work and things like that. It was all work related for the most part. And that again appealed to me because I made it clear in my initial introductions that I was very career focused. So then I'm thinking we share this where we're both career focused. Okay, great. Um, so yeah,
So,
everything was
yeah, so
wonderful.
this is what they call like love bombing. That these people find they lavish lots of rather extravagant either attention or praise or flattery on the person, and it's how it's hard to not feel kind of good about when someone sees these things in you and you feel good, and then that the person seems normal, and because why would you think that he's anything but normal, because that's how we operate on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, so that binds you to the person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You feel like you're being heard, and you feel like he's seeing things in you that make you feel really good about yourself. And yeah, it's yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Then
Um,
about 2 months into the relationship, you decide that you're going now would be an interesting time to introduce him to your family, and so you're going to go on a family trip.
yeah, I had some family members had something going on. And so, and my one family member lives in a major city. So I thought, okay, I can introduce him, but then we can also, go on some explorations of the city too. And it'll be a good time. Then not everyone's, overwhelmed with staying in each other's company constantly, but at the same time, I could get to see what my family members thought of him, because I really wanted their buy-in and their support from the beginning. That's always been important to me. And so I'll say it went okay, the trip. Um, but I would say that's when things started to change. I started to show more of his true colors a bit more.
Hmm.
One family member was staying with another as opposed to visiting me at my hotel. And
Okay.
he just subtly said, I'm surprised that your family doesn't want to spend more time with you. Huh? After you've made all this effort to go there. And I said, and the purpose of the trip was not about me coming. It was for a completely different event, a major event in life. I said, well, it's because it's not about me. We're all supporting this particular event that happened. But that's okay. I get lots of attention, but I almost thought, like, why are you making this observation? Like,
Hmm.
why is this the conclusion you're drawing from this?
Right.
Again, shrugged it off. Maybe he just doesn't understand. And I will say that was another thing about him, is his relationships were really non-existent. Very little
Okay.
family members, no friends. nothing like that. So I just thought, okay, he just doesn't know how close-knit families work. So then he started complaining that I was ignoring him. And
On this trip?
on this trip, right.
Trip.
And I said, well, my attention's been divided. I'm not going to say that because I'm visiting family members. But I felt like I felt like I was trying to overly convince him that I was the same person. Just my attention was divided, and I'm sorry if he felt ignored, but that wasn't the case. But I also felt conflicted, like, come on, like, I'm visiting family, like, that this was the purpose of the trip. So, and eventually, as the more I tried to convince him of that, eventually he backed down and he apologized. He's like, you know what, you're right. So I thought, okay, I've made my point. But I will say that the big thing that happened is that evening when we returned from the trip is when I caught him in his very first lie. First of many, many lies. He told me when we met how many times he had been married and divorced. It was the same as me. So during that trip, I happened to come across some information in his phone that he gave to me, by the way. He handed his phone over to me, and I happened to see this woman's contact info pulled up. And so I said, who is this? And he claimed it was an old girlfriend. And I happened to see it, and I said, but her address is the same as yours. And he said, well, yeah, she stayed with me. And I said, well, then this must have been serious. And he's like, not really. I'm like, well, somebody was living with you. So how could that not be serious? And he's like, no, it wasn't. Well, the more I'm looking, it was his estranged wife. So he was in the middle of a divorce, another divorce, and I figured it out.
Yeah. So you had no idea that he was
Right.
technically married and separated from this person.
No clue at all. None. I had no reason to know. Yeah, I mean, I didn't. Nope. No.
Right.
No
Why?
idea. Yeah. In fact, when he lied to me like at first when I confronted him, I said, "Who is this person?" And he said he didn't know. And I said, "Well, then why is she using your last name?" And he's like, "I don't know. Maybe because she's crazy." And then I'm
Wow.
like, "Okay." And I go, the reason why I could call him out on that is because it was posted on Facebook that they were together just a few weeks ago before we met, and they were in another major city together. And I'm like, you know who this is? You were just away with her. And I said, are you married? And he said, we're separated. And so he basically had to admit it. And so he begged me to forgive him. I'm like, no, you're a liar. You need to go. He said he couldn't believe that I was going to throw the past 8 weeks away that had been so wonderful. And I'll tell you, at that point, I knew he was displaying narcissistic behavior. And
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I knew it. And I said, no, you have to leave. So he gathered his things and left. He called me constantly that night. So I ultimately forgave him. And I thought, okay, it's a narcissistic behavior, but that doesn't mean, again, I can't diagnose anybody. Nobody can. And I just like, okay, you know what? He told me he was very embarrassed about this particular marriage. It didn't even last a year. And he said he was embarrassed because it's not someone he was typically with. She used him, like it was going through like all of these different things. And so I was like, okay, we all make mistakes. Maybe this is truly, maybe, okay, all right. Maybe you're embarrassed. Maybe you are this, maybe you're that. Okay, fine. I'll ultimately forgive you. But he said that he was disappointed that I wouldn't hear him out And the fact I kicked him out, he said, "Are you going to be kicking me out every time that there's a fight?" And I said, "Well, if you keep coming up that you have a wife, you bet your butt I'm going to kick you out. Like, what is this?"
Yes.
And but he said, he had had a lot of trauma in his life, and he couldn't handle the instability that I gave him when I kicked him out, and that he needed to feel welcome. So he had a pending divorce from me. This wasn't just a fight where I kicked him out. Like, I had plenty of reason. But I was like, no, I'm not gonna, I'm like, okay, let's just agree to disagree. There was a reason for this. But this became his mantra. I was unwelcoming and my house was uncomfortable. It was always that way ever since that time. And, I had a lot of relatives. There were certain relatives that he liked. He always said that they were afraid of me. And then the relatives that he didn't like.
You.
What's that?
Relatives that he liked, he said they were afraid of you.
Yes. They were afraid of me because I would come up like, my house was unwelcome. And I'm like, well, these relatives live with me. He's like, yeah, because they're afraid of you. Then the ones that he didn't like, they were the ones that ruled my life. They were the ones that I prioritized. So it just became this mantra. And
where you're the one who's always all bad things that are happening is because of you.
Yeah. And I would say that's where my behavior started to shift, because I was always, always trying to prove that wasn't true.
And just because this is something, again, that people who don't really understand how this dynamic works, is that these people who have these kind of out of the norm behavioral patterns, we'll say, they pull out the worst in the people that they're with. They kind of make the target person act like, just in ways they never normally would.
Ever.
But yeah, but they've laid such a groundwork in the beginning of the relationship where you're, where you think that person sees you in a particular way, and you want to get back to that. You want to back to that stage. Well, this. Yes, and so it makes you nuts, and it makes you act nuts.
Yeah, and if I can, I'll share. I'll just share a quick example of that. So, first, I got sick, and I was sleeping that particular day. He had a key, and he refused to come in with that key, and he said, because I wasn't answering my door, that maybe that meant he wasn't welcome. And I'm like, I was sleeping. I didn't even hear the doorbell ring. So like little things like that. And then I was like sick, trying to convince him to come back. Of course he was welcome. It's just that I was sick and didn't hear the doorbell ring, which was always unacceptable if I didn't hear him knocking. Then there was this misunderstanding. I had family visiting me again, and there was a misunderstanding about sleeping arrangements when they were visiting me. So because of that, he got upset and left. I mean, ultimately, he felt he didn't have a place to sleep. Not true, he did, but he felt he did.
Right.
So he blamed me for the misunderstanding and said it's because I didn't prioritize him. And if I would have just prioritized him, I would have cared enough to plan ahead, and then this whole thing would have been avoided. And he's right. If I would have planned ahead, it probably would have ended up better. But sometimes when family visits, you're chaotic. And again, my family's closer, so I never had a problem with certain family members just saying like, hey, here's where we're going to sleep, and that was fine. But he did not like that. He said they were controlling me. I'm like, okay. So anyway, he gets upset and leaves.
A more normal and healthy way to handle a situation like that would be, well, because just say, if he was hurt or whatever, okay, and maybe a more normal person was hurt, it would be like, okay, maybe next time we can work together to figure out a solution to this and have all of these decisions made in advance, and let's do that together. And and everything, we just go on your merry way, not blaming you and undermining you and making it seem like there's something inherently wrong with who you are as a person, and that's what caused all of this.
Yeah. And I definitely felt that way. I was like, it was all my fault. And these other family members were actually like, no, he's just a jerk. And I was like, no. And I was like, and I was even more devastated about this. I'm like, great. Now I have this tension between my family and this relationship. Now they're not going to get along, and all of this stuff. So ultimately, the visit's over. He leaves. Now, here's another good thing that he did. Not good, but he would break up with me every time there was an issue. Every time. So when this happened, where there was a misunderstanding about sleeping arrangements, he said, I obviously don't belong here. You obviously don't prioritize me. This relationship's done. So I was devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, please don't do this. This is just a misunderstanding. That's all. I'll take full responsibility for it. If I'd planned better, this wouldn't have happened. You're right. So I'm just devastated, and I'm like, you know what? This is crazy. I'm going to go talk to you about this. So I told him, he wasn't answering any of my texts or phone calls. I said, I'm coming to your house and we're going to talk about this in person. And I said, it's funny. You can hide a wife from me, an estranged wife, and I'm getting over that. But, this is a total misunderstanding. This is crazy. And he was like, just not answering me. So I went to his house, and when I got there, the driveway was blocked with his truck, so I couldn't get in. Like, so he totally did that on purpose. Like it was very obvious that I was being blocked. And so I was crying hysterically and pounding on the door and saying, please acknowledge me. I'm trying different doors, and he had a ring bell, so he saw me on the camera. And I mean, this took so much out of me, and I was like, I give up. I'm defeated. And so he wasn't answering me, mind you, this whole time. So this was probably like over a 3-hour period of me begging him to talk to me, and he would not speak to me. He would not acknowledge me in any way. And so I said, okay, I give up. And he responds then and says, maybe you'll remember what it's like to not be welcome at somebody's house. Maybe you'll remember what it feels like now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cruel, and it's manipulative. And that's kind of what, if you're listening to this and you don't really understand, how bad things can be, this is what's going on behind closed doors in some situations. And it's manipulative. It's not just that he's so self-centered and egotistical and whatever. There's a cruelty to the behavior, and there's a high degree of manipulation involved here. So he was withholding his contact, and I mean, which would make anybody crazy when you see what is objectively a normal misunderstanding, and someone is acting in such an extreme way. It's like you want to bring them back here and say, no, there's no reason to be acting like this. It's just the situation's just like this. It's just a misunderstanding, and it makes you feel like you're the one who has to behave in an extreme way in order to get their attention, to bring them back and say, hey, this is how that really is. And that's why you end up showing up at their house and, pounding on the door and whatever in the ring video, and just trying desperately to get their attention. And it makes you feel like you're the crazy one because you can't get their attention.
Yep. And what's so just interesting about that whole thing was ultimately when this all calmed down and I came over to talk about it, I even said, I was like, I didn't deserve that. And he was like, no, you didn't, but you have to look at it from my perspective. Would you answer the door when somebody's pounding on your door and jumping up and down? He's like, I didn't have the energy to deal with that. So he twisted it around because I was acting so irrationally. He couldn't even fathom giving me any attention because I was taking it out of him. I was taking away his peace and energy.
And that leads you to thinking like, yeah,
Yeah.
you are,
Yes.
you're the
Yes.
problem here. You're
Yes.
the one who's causing all of this.
Yes.
And because it's hard for you, like you said at the beginning, when you look at your own behavior, you think, yeah, that was a little bit of an out of control, behavior. And yeah, why would somebody want to open the door to that? And this is like just the level of manipulation is, someone who triggers you to behave in that way, and then just turns it right around back on you. Very, very, very
Yeah.
ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, that was happening a lot throughout
Yeah.
the relationship. And
About him, like when he was knocking on the door and you're sick and you didn't hear whatever, how that particularly offended him. There was also a story about FaceTime when he was trying to reach you on FaceTime.
that was actually, that happened a lot. He would try to reach me on FaceTime. It was never just a phone call. It always had to be FaceTime because he always wanted to see what I was doing. And if one doesn't have Wi-Fi, like if you're just driving along and you don't have Wi-Fi, that FaceTime's not going to work. And anytime the FaceTime didn't work, he would be angry with me. And I would call him back and he would ignore my phone calls. And I'm like, but I don't have Wi-Fi. I didn't know you called me. So how can you hold me responsible for this? I mean, he was just like, I want you to be available. Like, you need to be available when I call. And I'm like, I was available. I just can't FaceTime you right now. And that happened a lot. And it was almost to the point where I would try to be proactive and say, okay, I'm driving somewhere. I probably won't have FaceTime if you call. I was trying to just be proactive about everything.
Right.
And yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's so irrational. Yeah, it makes you kind of feel like you have to go to extremes in order to prevent this misunderstanding, which is not really a misunderstanding, but and so you feel like you have to go to extremes. And I'm going to mention this probably a couple times in the rest of the conversation together. The most damaging part of a relationship with someone like this is that it causes you, in your situation, or the person who's involved in this, the target, to lack the ability to trust your own judgment. So you can't even like think to yourself when you have someone who's saying, well, you need to be available to me on FaceTime whenever I want you there. And you're thinking, well, that's not rational because I don't always have access to FaceTime. And who behaves like that? Like who operates like that? And because that's not normal and in normal life. And when he insists on it, it makes you think, well, I guess I should be. Like maybe that's a sign that he really cares about me and really wants to, make sure that I'm okay or whatever, touch base because he loves me. And so then you begin to think, well, you lack the ability to look at a situation and accurately say, this situation is truly just a misunderstanding. It's not what he says it is. And over time, that chips away at your ability to trust your own judgment.
I would even take that a step further. So what you just said about like even like the oh, he truly loves me, truly cares about me. Over time, and this entire relationship lasted about 3.5 years. So over time, I didn't even care anymore if it was rational or not. It was just almost like, okay, this is just another one of his crazy things that you just have to accept and do. Because you're never going to be able to convince him that I don't have FaceTime. Like for whatever reason, he seems to just think that this is like, you don't want to believe that somebody's being irrational on purpose.
Right.
Something. So there. But then I'll take it another step further, is saying, I wasn't going through this alone. Other family members had begun to see what was going on, other people in my circle and family and friends. And so because they were saying, you're too smart for this, you need to go, and then you're still not going, you also think, okay, I'm just a hot mess no matter what circle I'm in, whether I'm in this relationship or whether it's to my family and friends. I'm not doing what anybody thinks I should be doing. And that's just because I'm so broken and I'm so crazy and I'm so messed up. That's why.
Wow. Yeah, you just get beaten down.
Get
So
beaten down, totally.
not only do you just accept his kind of crazy behavior, because it's not worth it to try to resist it, but then, what's wrong with you for staying there, which is
Yep,
kind of the take
yep,
message. These people are saying leave, 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 and then you don't. And so the automatic conclusion in your mind, which would be in anybody's mind, is, well, something's really wrong with me
yes,
because
yes,
this guy, making so many demands, he's oppressive, and everyone around me sees it and tells me I should leave, and I, for some reason, can't leave. So therefore, I'm the problem. I'm the
I'm the
mess.
problem. I'm the mess. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we can, I mean, keep fast forward. I mean, because oh wait, there's more.
Right.
You know, so yeah, I mean, it got to this point in the relationship where, we ultimately got married for some reason, and that was even an ordeal in itself because, um, holidays or special occasions were always an issue. So, um, he kind of led on that he was going to propose to me around Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. That got, he picked a fight with me and basically said, I picked a fight with him on Christmas Day. And I don't even remember what it was about. It was something stupid, but he basically said I wanted to make a scene in front of his family members and my family members on Christmas. Not true. So of course I'm beating the door down again, for the figurative door, just to try to prove that that's not true. And so eventually I get a ring like right before um, New Year's, and it was it wasn't even a like romantic gesture or proposal or anything like that. But ultimately, we're planning to get married. We were going to go away to do that. He canceled the trip twice because he was picking fights with me and got mad at me. And I even realized at the times that, like, okay, sometimes he would just not even, like, he would say things were canceled that really weren't. So I called him on his bluff the one time and I was like, you know what? Yeah, you said you canceled the trip. No, you didn't. So then he would forward me the actual cancellation to show that he was serious. So again, I would
Yeah.
be like, okay, wow.
He's trying to leverage, he uses as leverage all these different things, his attention,
Yeah,
trips, proposing, getting a ring, and then actually getting married. All of these things then become a point where he can leverage to make you feel bad about yourself
yeah,
in some way.
yeah, yeah. Um, it was all just,
How
um,
long did you before you eventually got married?
he pushed for a very quick marriage. So we got married in May of 2020. So we hadn't even been together an entire year yet at that point. So, he had pushed for, and that was something else, he would use, like, I want to marry you. I want to do all this. And it was just like, um, okay, well, if I'm so crazy, why do you want to marry me? But, yeah, it was
But
just
do you
kind
know
of this whole,
that's actually a main point of control for these people is they make you think that you're crazy, and so then they want to marry you, and you think, well, how could someone as crazy as I am wants to have somebody who wants to marry me, so I better marry this person because he's willing, and I'm a mess.
I'm a mess, but also, your goals, my goals still didn't change. I still wanted a partner and I still wanted those things. And I figured, yeah, if I invested all of this time and effort into somebody, and then, yeah, he uncovered the crazy in me and was still willing to put up with me, yeah, I was like, okay, well, that definitely is something to, you know, be valued, I suppose. And especially, again, I know I did things like pounding on doors, crying hysterically, throwing myself at things of trying to, incessant calling, things like that, just trying to be heard and understood. And so, because it wasn't positioned that way, I truly did believe that I was crazy, that I was acting out. And because my family and friends knew a little bit of what was happening and had already passed judgment on how the relationship shouldn't be taking place, I definitely couldn't tell them all this crap was going on. So now I'm
Yeah.
isolated further. Now
By
I
your,
only really have ultimately have I can't talk to my friends or family about any of this because they've
uh,
already passed their judgment.
right. And you have to know that he knew that. So
Oh,
this is
yeah.
the people, the his motivation, and people, and I don't know him, I've never met him, I've never evaluated him, but people like him who have these sorts of behavioral tendencies, their goal, the only way they can feel any sense of healthy, what we call healthy sense of ego or identity, or feel good about himself, is to make you feel like garbage. And so that's the only way he's going to get his narcissistic needs met. That's how these people work. That it's not about, oh, like going out and kind of like you get your MBA, you get your master's degree, and you feel really good about yourself because you've done something that's productive, and that's how you start to feel a sense of competence and confidence in the world, that you can navigate the world and navigate things in your life, and be successful at it. And that's that's what makes us feel good about ourselves in a healthy way. The only way these people can have any sense of feeling good about themselves is by making their targeted person or persons, because in some cases it's a group of people, it's not just one person, like in a relationship like we're talking here, but to make those people or you feel like trash, like undermine your sense of identity and who you are as a person, and just your basic dignity, is to take that away from you. And that's the only way they can feel a sense of power. So their sense of feeling good about themselves is actually a sense of power and control over other people. And the way to get power and control over other people is to take away their dignity. That's one of the worst things that you can do to somebody, but it's probably the most powerful thing that you can do, is to take away someone's dignity. Because then he's the one who took it.
Yeah.
And so, you kind of feel like this weird, attachment that you have to stay with him, because he's the one who determines whether you feel, confident or not.
That, and I also, you know what, I forgot to kind of mention, well, you know, um, he really, again, because he knew who I was, or dug so deep about finding out things, like he told me, he was like, I don't believe in divorce. And I'm like, okay, well, he's like, I'm looking for someone for forever, it didn't, and I was like, and I actually don't believe in divorce either. I mean, I didn't say, divorce
Right.
exists, so how do you believe in it or not? But ultimately that was not what I was looking for. Like I had never been the person to say, oh well, it just didn't work, so now we get divorced. I mean, I've had some things happen to me in my past where I just wound up with some really, really crappy partners. And now all I can do is move forward to do better. And I definitely believe I'm on my way to do that. But when you talk about taking away someone's dignity, I mean, I'll just fast forward to um 2022, where really this is where it all really started to get interesting. So just remember, um his mantra on me was, my environment was unwelcoming, it was unhealthy, um he wasn't comfortable, and it got to a point where I just was existing. I didn't want him around. Like I almost like would just dread when he would come home, but I had to be home or there would be issues with that. um and so I went away for, um well, let me back up a minute. I had another major family event that I really wanted him to go to, and he refused. And I was really upset about that, and he was mocking me for being upset. So I threw a plate and I chucked it at him. And from then on, I was abusive, I was crazy, just more of those things. I felt a lot of guilt for that because, again, I'm not condoning throwing anything. That nobody should ever be doing stuff like that. But I I definitely just, he was mocking me so badly that I snapped, and I did that.
Yeah.
Fast forward to another major life event. At that point, I didn't even want him there. I was like, I don't, I got to this place where I was just like, but he said, we need to stop talking about all of these problems. Let's just exist. Let's just do everything we can to get along. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try it his way. I'm just going to shut up. So I did. Anytime I had an issue, I didn't bring it up. And we were getting along fine. And he suggested we go away. We did that. I had another major family event coming up. I'm like, I don't even want him there because he's going to stand there and pout the whole time. And I don't even want to deal with it. So I said, I'm going away for the weekend. And I remember getting ready to leave. And I remember thinking to myself, wouldn't it be great if I could just tell him I'm never coming back and he can just have everything? I don't even care. Which, by the way, having everything, I had no clue about anything of his. I didn't know how much he made. I didn't know what his finances were. I didn't know anything. We were married and I knew nothing. He hid all of that from me. He had what I thought was a rental property. I found out a year after the fact that he sold it. So this whole time he was living off of me for free, basically. I thought he had a rental property and I was paying all of our household expenses and it was all evening out. That's what he told me. And it's funny because I even said, why don't you sell the house? Because this is when the market was really hot, where it was truly a seller's market where things were going over the asking price. And I said, why don't you sell this property? And he laughed at me and he said, this is my retirement. I'm sorry, I don't have a padded retirement like yours. I have to actually, work and do other things because I worked for a company that had a really good retirement plan. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm stupid. I'll just be quiet. So anyway, that was all a farce. He had sold it well into that. So anyway, I went away and he kept asking me when I would be home, which wasn't totally unusual, but I did think he was acting rather strangely. And now looking back on it, it was very obvious what he was doing. But I called to let him know I'd be home, and he said, well, I moved out. And
you called, let him know when you'd be home, and he responds with, hey, I moved out.
Yes. And I was floored. And he said he was sorry. And I'm just going to preface this with, I was very hurt by that action, but now I'm reflecting, I wasn't necessarily as hurt by him. Like, I knew this was not working. I knew something was truly wrong. But the fact to be treated like that, if he could have just said, hey, this isn't working. I don't think either one of us are happy. Let's talk about this. Let's see what we want to do. That would have been one thing. But just to do this behind my back, like this is something you do to somebody that you can't escape.
Right.
With rational conversation. This is what you do to somebody. You move out behind their back when they're abusing you, when they truly are crazy. And I mean, he was just like, I'm sorry, but when you threw that plate at me, that was the final straw. I couldn't handle you anymore.
Wow. And
I said, why couldn't you have just talked to me about moving out? He's like, because you would have just been so hysterical. I never would have been able to go. And I'm like, again, I'm thinking like, if somebody really wanted to go, I might have said, hey, let's talk about this, but I never would have. never would have blocked somebody from
Right.
leaving or whatever.
Right.
You know, and I mean, again, I truly was thinking before I left, I was like, wouldn't that be nice? Here, you have it all, and I'll never come back. So I was there. Trust me.
Yeah, you were even there in your head thinking, hey, that's not been such a bad idea. So
Right.
one story that you mentioned, and then I think we should probably talk about what it was like for you after that time, because then you discovered a lot of things about him, that he moved out, that he was putting that into place for an extended period of time. So what he, a few other stupid things that he would do, like putting the hairball, the story with the
Oh,
hairball.
yes, that's what I forgot. Okay, yes. So this was a whole other thing, again, just showing that I was crazy or what have you. He was very, very neat. He was a major neat freak. And, he said the condition that I kept my home was just another reason why he was uncomfortable. And, I'm just going to preface this with, yeah, I felt ugly and disgusting and all of this stuff. And it wasn't, maybe I just didn't feel like doing the dishes that night or something. We've never lived in filth or anything like that. So I had to really begin to reset my expectations. But yes, the hairball, the infamous hairball in the sink. So he had cleaned the bathroom, and he was good about helping around the house. He cleaned the bathroom. It was immaculate, with the exception of this hairball in the sink, this humongous hairball. And what I realized was he'd cleaned the floor and put all of the contents from the floor into the sink. And
Nice.
yeah. And again, the whole bathroom's immaculate. Like, could this have been like an oversight? No, not with him. Like, no, this was done on purpose. So I said, hey, what's up with this hairball in the sink? He's like, what are you talking about? I said, you clean the bathroom, then you put all of the stuff from the floor into the sink. Why? And he's like, it must have been an accident. I must not have realized it. You know what? I just won't help you anymore. I'm trying to be helpful, trying to be a nice guy, but now I'm just not going to help you out anymore. Forget it. And at that point, I
Insane.
don't even think I argued with him of like, oh no, please help me. Cause I was like, you're just ridiculous. But I was
Yeah.
starting to get onto him, but I was just like, you know what? Okay, fine. Don't help me anymore. We can play it like that. We all know that you're not going to really not do that. So whatever.
And so that story just kind of underscores, or is an example of the twisted logic that people can use. That then, like, how are you supposed to argue with that? Like, it doesn't even make any sense,
No.
Like, oh, accident, and because of that, and because you're picking on me for making doing something accidentally, I'm never going to do this again. I'm not going to help. Like, that's just multiple steps of illogic. I mean, it just doesn't, it's irrational. Yeah. And
But
that's
then like
how.
he could do things like this. So like, but then like on the flip side, like once he said, can you guys pick up your garbage? Like he sent me like a text of like, it was very short. It said something about garbage or something. And I said, there's a way to ask that nicely. So I did try to stand up for myself. All of a sudden he comes up and he starts dumping garbage on top of my car. He said, oh, you want this house to be a mess? Fine. Let's just do it. Let's not worry about the garbage. And he dumped garbage on top of my car.
Wow.
So that was okay. But then I asked him about leaving a hairball in the sink, and now it's I'm never going to help you again. So either
Yeah.
way, I'm the extreme problem,
Right.
and he's either the helper or the one who just like I just don't care. Like it was so bizarre to wrap my head around, even just
There.
like these. Yeah, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, because we're just, I want to make sure that we're, mindful of the time, and because
Right.
there's so much to talk about, and that's so relevant, that people need to hear this, because if you're listening to this and you're hearing these stories and you're starting to kind of relate to what A is saying, it might be worthwhile to reach out for some help. So just to say that.
Mhm.
So you're trying to get away, or you're trying to divorce, trying to end this relationship. And that, of course, is not straightforward.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't at all. So yeah, overall, he left behind my back. That was devastating, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, in terms of it was devastating because, again, it was this this crazy person is telling me that I'm so crazy to live with, and he
Right.
can't stand to be around me. It was like, what? So anyway, I, move past all this, and I start to truly realize there's nothing I can do. Maybe, I don't know. Then I got breast cancer. I'm totally okay now and everything, but he was such a jerk to me during that, and basically um accused me and the doctor that was examining me of having a thing. Like, this doctor was examining me right in front of him, so obviously there was, something going on. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
um
that's
that,
just
that
sick.
was that was sick. And so at that point I just realized, I'm like, you know what, I can't even justify this anymore. Like, everything up until then, even the leaving me part, I thought, you know what, because he said he felt he didn't have a voice, etc. I thought, okay, you know what, maybe it is me. Maybe I am too passionate, or maybe I am something. But then when I got cancer and he basically blamed me and then said that I was doing something with the doctor, I was like, oh, okay, I filed for divorce. Um, and I would love to just say that I waited the 90 days for the divorce papers to come through and then lived happily ever after. And unfortunately, that didn't happen, because he still, then it was like, do you really want this divorce? No, of course. Who wants a divorce? No, I don't want a divorce. Um, why don't we try? Why don't we try to be better? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? So I would try, and then something else would happen where, I didn't get a FaceTime call or something. It was just this stuff. And then ultimately, he would keep asking me for another chance, and when I would give him another chance, then he would treat me like crap. And then I realized, I caught on to, I think he was looking for his next supply, and so he
Mhm.
needed to keep me around. That's something with narcissistic tendency people, that they need somebody, like you said, to make them feel good by making them feel like garbage. He wasn't succeeding in making me feel like garbage anymore.
Right.
I was starting to find my voice, so he needed to keep me at bay until he could find somebody else to replace me. I will say, when I figured out he ultimately did find someone to replace me, that hurt really badly. Um, but again, it was just almost like I had wasted all of this time, and this person that I thought I knew didn't exist, and I was more depressed and crazy over it, and sleeping and just trying anything I could do to cope and prove that I wasn't crazy, and prove that I did have some sort of meaningful time with him where we actually did have a relationship, and I was lying to myself at this time. I was trying so hard to prove to myself that this was a relationship and I wasn't just this narcissistic supply. And I had to just come to terms with, uh, that's all this was. That's all this
Yeah.
was.
And that's why it's so hard, because when you're a normal, healthy person, and involved with someone who's not, and it's like it's so hard to break away even from that person, because it feels like it shouldn't have to be that way, and it is, and it's cruel. Like, he's cruel, or was cruel, and it just makes it much worse. So let's end, though, by giving people some hope, because
Yes.
my tons of hope. Yes. So tell a little bit about, about your journey since pulling away from him.
Yeah, so I mean, education was the key for me, first of all. Reading as much as I could about these types of relationships. Um, but also just, a lot of therapy. I actually, and I think I was up seeing 3 therapists at one time for a while, and that's just because, I just got a little something different from each, and
Yeah.
just different timing. And so that is very helpful if you're able to do that. um and then ultimately, it really gave me a um understanding of what I truly did want in a relationship, and what I truly needed, and ultimately what boundaries I was going to set, and what I was going to accept and not accept. So I never intended to find another relationship. I kind of thought maybe I would just date for a little bit and just kind of test the waters. But I actually did find a relationship. Where not that you need a relationship to be happy, but because I had accepted that, I think that's why God opened the door for me to find somebody that I do have a healthy relationship with. And we both kind of he has a very similar story to mine. So we both kind of like we're like, hey, we're both in a healthy relationship for the first time ever. This is really great and exciting. But I'm not going to say my life has been perfect because I've had some bumps in the road in terms of personal work and kids and just some hard decisions that I've had to make. And but that's life. That's life. I know that I'm confident and competent enough to figure this out. Like I said, with God, not as um, this person's opinion about me
Right.
or what this person thinks anymore. I don't have to make decisions based on that. I'm not going to say that his voice still isn't there sometimes, but that's okay. He's
Yeah.
Satan, so that
There you go.
yeah,
I always tell people it takes a long time, like longer than you'd think it would, to actually fully heal and fully recover from such a damaging relationship because these people are experts at driving their target into the ground. It's not like they just create an atmosphere where it's just unhealthy. It's actually cruel. And so it just takes longer than leaving like I'm going to say like a normal unhealthy relationship that's just not satisfying and not good for both people. That happens, of course, all the time, every day. That's not what this is, and as a result, it does take longer because remember, the biggest impact that this has on the targeted person is that it causes you to not trust your own judgment, and so
mm-hmm.
to learn the process of trusting your own judgment again just takes time. You have to encounter things and then determine, well, is this really the best way? Is this the right way to respond? Am I supposed to feel this way? Is this my fault or is it not my fault? And relearning all of that stuff and feeling
Yeah,
then confident about being able to determine, when your judgment of a situation and how people are treating you and then how you react and respond to the people and how they behave. And that just it takes a lot longer than what you would hope. But I mean, you sound like you're in a really such a great place after going through such a terrible situation. And I'm sorry that you went through it. But it sounds like you learned a lot. And so from my perspective, the blessing is being able to talk to you and give you an opportunity to tell your story, because I personally think more people need to hear your voice and your story, and because you're the story of a lot of other people who are going through this. And I don't know why there's a lot more of these pathologic types of people out there. I think there's more than ever before. And as a psychologist, I always kind of wonder why. Like, it used to not be so common and now it feels like it's very common. So I don't know what's going on there. But anyway, is there any last words that you want to leave for people before we wrap up here? Just kind of um, last comments about hope or healing, those sorts of things.
yeah. I mean, I would always just say, your intuition is definitely there for a reason. Always listen to it. And I even if you're wrong, let's just say, like, I mean, somebody gives you the creeps and you just want to get away. I mean, so many people and women that I've talked to, it's like they want proof that there's this red flag, or they want proof that they're right. And it's like, you know what? If it feels off to you, then that's okay. Move on. It's all right. You don't have to let somebody prove to you that they really are a jerk before you aren't interested. Like, just don't be interested. That's totally okay. It's okay to trust yourself. I would also just say, if you do find yourself in this situation, there's so much help out there and there's so much reaching out, you definitely can do. And there's more people that love you than you're giving yourself credit for. And you definitely, you can be selective about your cheerleaders. that will help you through it. But ultimately, you know, they say no contact is the best way to go, and that definitely is the best way to go. But you know, a professional could help you through that for sure. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself being yo-yoed and tossed back and forth. And I would just say, finally, yeah, like, you know, the healing is going to take some time, and there are some things that you know, some people think you have this misconception that you have to be completely healed before you like move on to the next phase of your life. Everything is a process. Everything is a journey. I've learned so much about myself. I've learned so much about yeah, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of people that go through this, and you probably have acted in ways that you aren't proud of, and just give yourself a lot of grace and hold your head up high. And it's a process, it's a journey, and you know, you'll ultimately be okay. You just have to work through it.
Very good. That is a really good word, A. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I want to again just commend you for having the courage really to do this. You know, because it's not easy. There's a slight bit of risk, you know, when you know, poking the bear here possibly with people, but your voice and your story it reflects a lot of other stories out there that I think need to be heard, and because I think that there's a lot of women in particular, not only women, by the way, that men can be caught up in relationships like this as well because of the manipulative quality. We're all susceptible to it, and that's really important to understand too. We are all susceptible to this in every facet of life, not just, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, also in the work and in, you know, in churches. It's unfortunately very common in churches,
Yeah.
kind of all over the place. So it's just important to hear your voice and to hear your perspective. So thank you so much, A. And while you're listening to this, if this is you, if you're resonating with what A has been talking about, go get help. Get help. Get help. Get help. There's ways to support. You can get support from people who have been through it, from professionals who can help you move away from these unhealthy and really damaging, destructive relationships. There's ways to get out. Please reach out for help. If you are listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I know somebody who might be in this sort of relationship, please share this with them, because it might be the thing that they need to hear, to help them start to think maybe there's something not right, that needs to change in this situation. So please feel free to share this. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. Comment below what your thoughts are about this. And yeah, so A, I just want to thank you again so much for your bravery and your time and your willingness to tell your story. It's so powerful. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.